This episode of Uzo Talk is proudly brought to you by the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales. Search for the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales on Facebook to find out more. There's no Uzo Talk without a bottle of Uzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets, to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Uzo Talk podcast.
Sound is.
Nick, we say this a lot, but what a few weeks it's been for this podcast, because you can now listen to this show on YouTube, right?
We can. Hey, how good's that? Every episode of our podcast is now on YouTube.
That's right, going right the way back to the very first episode. All of them are on there, including all of the videos that we've done up until this point, which we've been doing since the beginning. You know, short snippets, but not entire episodes, let's say. Although you guys have been mentioning that you want that, we're going to look into that for you. But it's so exciting, isn't it?
It is. And I think I read somewhere it's the most popular channel in the world now. So, and now we're on it every episode on YouTube. How good's that?
That's right. So we need your help to get us to 1,000 subscribers to start with, because we haven't really pushed it much. Let's be honest about that. So tell your family, tell your friends, subscribe to us on YouTube. Go and check it all out, right?
Definitely, yeah. Look, we've got to get to 1,000. That's our goal. So we need you guys to help us out. I'm sure we'll get there in no time, Tom, with our people.
And there's good stuff on there as well. In particular, there's one video that I think it's reached about 16,000 views at this point.
Yeah.
With Angelo Taruca talking about the old Olympic Airways and his time as a travel agent, effectively. It is one of the funniest things that's happened on this show, isn't it?
Yeah, classic. Because you get to see his facial expressions, his hand movements. He's a very funny guy. It sounds funny, but even looks funny too.
Yeah, definitely. He's on there. Nick Giannopoulos is on there. Mary Koustas is there. Peter Economides. NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis as well. There's clips of all of these guys there. Again, not the full episodes when it comes to video, but the audio experience. The full episodes of the podcast are there. So it's just another way to be able to get in touch with us, to comment, to get your views heard, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, Tom. It's another avenue. You guys asked for it, we've delivered, and if you can help support us by following us, that'd be awesome.
Tell family and friends and everyone. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us, right?
Well done, Tom. Well said.
Awesome. Okay, and thank you to our sponsors for this episode. First of all, the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales, who were fantastic in that last episode, weren't they?
Mate, how good was that episode? And the food they brought in, the National Geographic book, how good was that book?
Well, I'm still on a bit of a buzz about the spinalo. I mean, I was scared as to try that, but it ended up being really good, wasn't it?
It did, yeah, it went well. And we're getting a lot of fan mail. So, George Karantonis, you're getting a lot of...
More than usual, it has to be said. There's a lot of Kalimnians out there.
There is. They've come out from everywhere. And they all know George. So, George Karantonis, you're doing something right, mate. Everyone knows you.
The silver tongue himself, right?
Yes, that's right. He's got a great voice. How good's his voice?
It is fantastic. We're very happy to have it on the show.
Yeah, and how good are the Kalimnians? They're offering free Greek dance lessons, they said. So anyone out there who's got adults or kids who want to learn how to Greek dance, reach out to the Kalimnian Association. They'll put you in a couple of free dance classes.
Nick will be the first one through the door, right?
Probably do a hip, do my knee, walk out with a Zimmer frame.
Yeah. But you're quite right. They do offer these lessons to everyone if they want them. So guys, get in touch with the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales on Facebook. That doubles as their website, doesn't it? Yeah,
definitely. They're good people, and it was a great episode. If you haven't heard it, listen to our Kalimnos episode. You'll know anything and everything you want about the island. Beautiful island it is, and we've got to go, don't we, Tom?
I mean, we were genuine when we said after that episode that I really want to go now.
Yeah, well, I've actually been there.
Have
Tip
you?
of it, yeah. Long
you
story.
You didn't say this last year.
Yeah,
last episode.
I should have. I forgot. What's the tip?
How did you forget that you've been there?
We're on a boat from Cotsis.
Yeah.
And part of the boat trip was you went to Kalimdor, and I remember we had this amazing captain. He dove off the boat, came up with an octopus.
Yeah.
Literally caught an octopus with his bare hands, chopped it up. We had that as a mezedaki with our ouzo. Then we got into lunch. But that's the closest. I don't know what beach it was, but that's the closest I got to Kalimdor. We technically were in a Kalimdor beach, and that was it.
So you grazed Kalimdor?
We touched on it, yeah. I was in Kalimnian water.
We also need to thank the Greek Providor, obviously, who are our great sponsors, who we'll talk about shortly. But yeah, thank you to the Greek Providor also for making this episode possible. Nick, we have a slightly different episode today because it all centers around the origin and cultural ownership of a song in the form of this book. Whose is this song? Balkan nationalism, Greece, and shared culture. I just want to read the blurb to you because I think it's a good sort of summary of what we're about to talk about. It says, inspired by the documentary film Whose Is This Song by Adela Piva, this book explores nationalism and shared culture in the Balkans. It's a compilation of articles by travel writers and academics, many of whom a few of whom we've had on this show actually,
Sure.
mainly of Greek-Australian background, expert in the fields of music, film, history, politics and social sciences, relating to this area of southeastern Europe. It is a book for the student and also for the general reader fascinated by the Balkan region with its rich cultural heritages, its complex history, and its conflicts. And I mean, complex doesn't really do it justice, does it?
No, not at all. But look, I love a book with a question mark. So I think we're going to become investigative reporters with this episode. We're going to have to find out whose song really is this?
Yeah, and you've read a little bit of the book. It has to be said, I haven't yet. I haven't had a chance because, you're still reading it. But what have you thought so far?
It's fascinating, packed with information. I have to read it. Some pages I've got to read twice. Like it's really intense. But look, I've got a lot of questions about the book. But what a better way to someone to answer those questions.
Absolutely, because while I haven't read the book, we do have the editor of the book as well as one of the contributors to it in the room to make up for that deficiency. So our first guest is, among other things, a teacher, academic, researcher and published writer who has been committed to Greek culture for her entire professional career. She's an avid writer of lyrics, songs and educational materials, and is also in the process of publishing a series of educational bilingual Greek-Australian books for children accompanied by songs. We're incredibly proud to have Eleni Eleftherias Kostakidis with us. Welcome, Eleni.
Thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be part of your program.
Well, we're very proud to have you here.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Actually, we've got to do a shout out to Lucky Aronis, who introduced me to you.
Yes, Lucky's my little cousin, Lucky, and he said to me, I know these guys who might want to interview you for your book. And I said, who are they? He said, the guys from Uzo Talk. And I said, Uzo Talk? I know them. I've heard some of their podcasts. They're amazing. I said, if you can get me on that, I'll, do you a big favour, Lucky.
There you go. So it sounds like we owe Lucky a few coffees, Tom.
Absolutely. Coffees or Uzo? Come on.
Uzo.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, as I said, you're incredibly proud to have you here. Very interested in all the work that you've done, which we're going to talk about during this episode. But we do have another guest here with us who's going to help us with this discussion, who has a PhD from the University of Cambridge, where he studied classics, including Latin and ancient Greek literature and theatre, ancient history, linguistics and philosophy. For nearly 3 decades, he was a member of staff in the Modern Greek Studies program at the University of Sydney. He continues to research in the field of early modern Greek society and culture, especially on Crete and other areas ruled by Venice in the 16th and 17th centuries. Other interests include Greek music and Balkan studies. He has a PhD from the University of Cambridge and an honorary doctorate from the University of Crete. In retirement, he continues to research Phoenician Crete and early modern Greek writers, including one of our favourites, Nick Doumanis.
Oh, wow.
By his own admission, he doesn't know much about Uzo, but he has published research on the history of Cretan wines, would you believe, Nick? We're equally proud to welcome Alfred L Vincent. Welcome, Alfred.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a great honour to be here, to be on the Uzo programme.
Lovely
Honours
to have
all
you
ours.
here. Absolutely. Well, I think the stage is set, Nick. What do you think?
I think it is, mate. I think it's time.
Should we have a drink?
Let's have a drink.
Stiniamas.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they say you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't cheers with water or anything. But Eleni, you don't drink.
No, I don't.
And Alfred, you're sticking to the water today. So the alcoholics in the room,
We'll drink for you guys.
The interviewers, yes.
So if you see the quality rapidly decrease, you know exactly why. Standard operating procedure on this show.
Exactly. No.
Nick, what are you and I drinking?
Well, thanks to the Greek providor, we got a new supply, Tom.
We got a new shipment.
We did, and we're trying we're stuck with a 35N.
But not the ouzo.
No, we've gone the Tsikoudia. We've had a couple of Tsikoudias, but this is the musket of spinners from Crete. 38% alcohol. What do you think of that one?
I like this one, unsurprisingly.
Dynamite.
It is.
I mean, you can probably smell it from where you're sitting.
I can smell it from here, yes.
It's a traditional Tsikoudia, isn't it?
It is. So I think with this one, you're going back to sort of the roots. There's nothing sort of gimmicky about this one. It is what it says.
We're going back to the 1940s with this one.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah,
definitely. Bit of this, some scratchy old Greek music. A bit of mezzel like we've got here.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
No, I love it. It's great. It's keeping me warm. It's freezing out there. It is winter, we said. Perfect remedy for us. And everyone's getting sick.
Yeah,
I haven't been sick yet.
Actually, neither have I. Knock on wood.
Yeah, it's probably. I reckon I'm
I'm
putting it down to the Tsikoudia.
Yeah. So it's keeping you warm. It's keeping me sane. It's keeping everyone well lubricated. We're going well.
Yeah, we love it. How good's our job, mate?
It is. So huge thanks again to the Greek Providor for providing us with the drinks. GreekProvidor.com.au. You can get all of this stuff. So the ouzo, the tsikoudia, and actually one of the conversations that came off the back of the Kalymnian episode is the fact that they actually do bring in the thyme honey. So there's no need, guys, to smuggle it in an orifice. Just get it from the Greek Providor.
Classic. How did George describe it? Thea Customs.
Thea Customs.
Yeah.
Do not smuggle that stuff into the country. Just get it through the Greek Providor, guys. It's not worth the risk.
Easy. Someone knocks on your front door, nice package. Best way to do it.
Yeah.
Well done.
Whereas the other one, who knows how it got here.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows what's in it.
Exactly.
Classic.
Oh dear. Thank you for your support, the Greek Providor.
Thank you, Greek Providor. And look, Eleni, we always start with all of our episodes. We want to know where our guests are from. So do you want to tell us where you were born, where your parents or grandparents are from?
Yes.
Usually an interesting story comes out of it when we ask these questions.
Okay. So I was born in Australia, in Paddington, and my grandparents were from Asia Minor, Kostakidis, and a place called Nicomedia, which is modern-day Izmit, just south of Constantinople. We have part of our, μια φλέβα, as we say, part of our background is Pontian. And in Nicomedia, as you may know, in 1921, there was a big, there was an ethnic cleansing and a big genocide there. 12,500 people were killed. Not in Izmir, this is Izmit. This is south of Constantinople. 12,500 people were killed, 800 escaped, including my grandparents. They went to Constantinople first and from there over to Drama in Greece, where my father was born, and my mother was born on the way to Thessaloniki, on the island of Limnos, where her mother died, and then she grew up in Thessaloniki, so she considers herself to be a Thessalonikian. My father, having grown up in Drama, which is very close to the border with Bulgaria, there were always skirmishes, always problems there, so that when my parents decided to migrate to Australia and they brought my grandmother with them, and what I say in my book too, I've dedicated my book, Whose Is This Song?, to my parents, they threw a black rock behind them, as we say in Greek, πέταξαν μαύρη πέτρα, so they were never to return. My father never wanted to go back. He never cared about his place. He didn't love the area. Like a lot of islanders come to Australia and they love where they come from and they love their village and they, they really want to go back and, and their children go back. My father wasn't like that. He, he grew up with very difficult times, always with, people being killed and...
Yeah.
So was that a source of pain in your upbringing as well? Was that something that was prevalent, the fact that they didn't want to go back, or was it never spoken about?
Yeah, look, there was a lot of trauma. My grandmother was one of the women who had to drown her own babies from Nicomedia. Hundreds of women did this during the genocide, where they had to drown babies because there was no way they could feed them. The babies were screaming. The people were trying to escape the Asia Minor catastrophe, whatever. And so she already had her own traumas going to Greece. And then my father and his cohort had their own traumas from different issues that were happening in Greece. And also, don't forget, the Greeks in Greece, the dopi as we call them, weren't very welcoming to these people who came from Asia Minor, you know. So 3 times they were strangers, once in their own land, my grandmother, once in Greece, and again in Australia as a migrant. 3 times a stranger, yes.
So your mum's side were in Izmit?
Yeah, the father's side was Izmit, and the mother's side was Kostantinoupoli. Very close.
Oh, so both from Asia Minor?
Both from Asia Minor, both sides, yeah.
And how did they get over to mainland Greece?
Well, they travelled over by boat. As I said, my mother went through Limnos from Constantinople, around there somewhere.
So your mother went through Limno?
Yeah, well, my mother was born in Limno as the parents were escaping.
You're kidding?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, she was born there, yeah.
And has your grandmother said any stories about that time?
My mum's mother died at birth, so my mother never met her mother. But my other grandmother, told us many stories about what they went through. She never had any hatred for the Turkish people, I've got to say, so I'd like to stress that. Yeah. She blamed it all on the war itself. They grew up and they lived in an area where they were friends with a lot of other Turkish families. There were Armenians in that area, there were Turks, there were lots of different Kurds, lots of different ethnic groups. But in all this anabubula, as we say, in all this issue that was happening, the nationalism raised its ugly head, and this is just one of the consequences. And she wasn't particularly very happy with the way they were treated in Greece either by the people there. So she felt this hatred from everybody. Yeah. She had a lot of issues. But she herself had no hatred for these people.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be said that, this is another one of those stories that we've heard about, that particular crossing. Mary Kostakidis was, told a very interesting story about her grandmother nursing a dead baby across, across that body of water there, and eventually having to throw it into the ocean, and she never ate fish after that for that reason. Just unbelievable stories. What sort of strength? Tell us about the strength do they have?
Yeah.
Your grandmother,
well, look, a lot of these women gave their babies opium to put them to sleep.
Really?
So whoever had the opium gave the baby opium, and they wrapped the babies up and they let them go. This has all been documented, and there's a book out by he was a journalist who was there at the time, Kostas Faltates, and he's been translated into English in Melbourne, actually. One of the writers there, I can't remember his name now, the book is called The Genocide of the Greeks of Nicomedia, but it talks about what they actually did, and there are witness accounts to say that. So they wrapped the babies up and put them in the water. In our situation, my grandmother had put the baby in the water, and then my grandfather jumped in to take it back again, and then the Greek soldiers who were around made them throw it back in again. So I think there was a bit of coercion there as to, you either have to get rid of the babies and any children under the age of 3 who were crying, so it wasn't just real little babies. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to escape, and they'd catch all of them and they'd all have the same fate.
Right.
Wow.
So the reason was they had to be quiet.
They had to be quiet, and there was no food to give them. There was no food. And then when they were being caught, terrible things would happen to them. Like babies would be disemboweled and things, all these terrible things. I mean, there's a lot of witness accounts of these things, these happenings.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This episode of Ouzo Talk is proudly brought to you by the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales. Search for the Kalimnian Association of New South Wales on Facebook to find out more. There's no Ouzo Talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets, to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Wow. And, so your grandmother made it to Limnos, obviously she was pregnant.
This grandmother went straight to Drama.
Oh, straight
this
to
is
Drama.
my dad's mother,
Your dad's
to
mother.
Drama,
Okay.
To a hostile environment in Drama, to a beautiful old Turkish house, double-story, beautiful house actually, that had a Turkish family living in there, as was the case in many cases there, and they had to move in when the family was still there, and then when that family was deported out of Greece to go to Turkey, modern-day Turkey, they helped each other basically, these families, one by welcoming the Greek family in and one by helping the other family leave.
Did your grandmother ever look up this family again? Did they ever cross paths again?
No, I don't think so, no.
Because there is a strong community, I forget the town in Turkey, but there's a strong community where they still speak Greek.
Yeah, of course they
and
do. There'd be lots of places.
The Muslim Greeks, essentially, that went over.
Yeah. There's a lot of Cretan Muslims. I think it's in the film, one of the films I talk about in this book that inspired me was the documentary film Twice a Stranger by Apostolidis and Averov. And it's based on the book by Bruce Clark. And Bruce Clark did a big study and he spoke with people on all sides, both Turks and Greeks. He actually goes to a village in southern Turkey and speaks to a number of Cretan Turks who actually came from Greece, who spoke Cretan, and they considered Crete to be their country and their homeland, and they missed it. And a lot of them played bouzouki, actually. It shows it in the actual documentary film. I think Alfred knows a lot more about that than I do, but
We'll get to Alfred in a second. Just one last question. So how did your parents meet, obviously, in Drama?
They didn't. They met in Thessaloniki. My mum was from Thessaloniki and Veria, and they actually got married in Veria.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and my sister was born in Veria, and then they decided to come to Australia, for a better life for the children, whatever. I was born here. And
how did they come over? Was it the Patrice by any chance?
Yeah, they came over with the Kirenia, I think. Yes,
okay.
The Kirenia.
Yep.
And
Interesting.
There you
So
go.
that's how they ended up here, and I ended up here.
That's a
Nice.
That's a good way to bring Alfred into it as well. I mean, Alfred, you're not Greek, obviously,
No,
but
I'm not Greek.
you may as well be given your
might be.
academic background. Is there any connection there that you've got with Greece?
As far as I know, there's no Greek blood or no ouzo either in my running around my veins, as far as I know.
Well, not yet, but
Not yet, that's right.
where are your ancestors from, Alfred?
On the mother's side, they were both from central or north central England. And on my father's side, well, his mother came from Liverpool, and he was born in Liverpool.
Nice.
His father actually was from the island of Jersey, which produces a lot of seafarers, and he had set up home in Liverpool. So you can say that I'm 1/4 of a crapaud, a frog. Sorry, a toad, because that's the French nickname for the islanders of Jersey.
Yeah, right.
Who spoke originally a sort of French dialect, though that's barely surviving now.
Right.
So as you said in the introduction, I grew up and was educated in England, went to school in Nottingham. So Robin Hood's my favourite hero, of course.
Wow.
And
Are you a Liverpool fan, is the question?
look, I don't have a lot of time to follow sport, to be quite honest. I suppose if it was a fan of anything, I'd be a fan of Nottingham's teams, though.
So Forest.
They're not doing too well, I know. Yeah, Forest was just opposite our school in Nottingham.
Yeah.
Their ground.
A Beatles fan, then?
Sort of, yes. Yeah. My parents didn't really like popular music very much.
Okay.
They were, well, a little bit straight-laced, shall we say.
Sure.
The Beatles were the one group for which my father made an exception, because with their Liverpool accent, you see, he said, they're the only ones who talk proper English.
Yeah. So they were representing you guys on the world stage well, in his estimation.
Well, he thought they talked the way he liked.
Sure, okay, gotcha. Very interesting.
So maybe that's the Greek connection, Tom, because you said you're a Nottingham Forest fan.
I didn't actually say that, but...
Well, we're going to claim that you are, because the owner of Nottingham Forest
is
a Greek.
Yeah.
Have you done a DNA test at all?
No, I've not done a DNA test, so...
Okay. Well, we're going to claim you anyway as an honorary Greek, at least for
honorary,
today anyway.
Well, Alfred was the head of the Greek department for many years. When I was a student, Alfred was my teacher.
Oh,
Is that right?
And he instilled a love of Greek letters and Greek culture in everyone of my generation who went through the university. So, Yeah, I think Alfred's one of the, if anything, it's because of Alfred that there are so many Greek teachers around that have embraced Greek and have spread it to their students as well.
Well, it has to be said.
Well, there were others as well, Eleni. I was the first one there, chronologically. The one who was given the job, first of all, of setting up the original courses in 1974. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to be said that, we mentioned Professor Paul Cartledge earlier, who was, I think he still is the head of the classics in Cambridge at the moment, if not still, still involved in some capacity. There's something to be said about Brits who sort of promote Greek culture in that respect, and he has an honorary, I think, citizenship of the state of Sparta, for example.
Oh, yes, indeed, yes.
And you yourself have an honorary PhD from Crete as well.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So there's something to be said about that. There's a lot of Philhellenes in the UK, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of classical studies at the main universities. Modern Greek, I would say, is not doing particularly well, as in Australia and so many other countries.
Yes.
Yep.
But yes, there is a tradition there. Not so much in Nottingham, where I grew up, but of course I studied classics in Cambridge, as you correctly said. I didn't actually do modern Greek for my first degree.
Sure.
Ancient Greek studies anyway, it's very well established.
Yeah. And why did you gravitate towards that? What was it about Greek culture and history and whatnot that drew you?
Well, nothing particularly altruistic.
You fell into it.
I'd done classics at school. I enjoyed it. We were told that with a good classics degree you could get into anything, maybe with a postgraduate qualification or something. Sure. And I believe that. And I think it's true. So I did classics without any modern Greek in the set of subjects. My colleagues in my year went into all kinds of different professions. One became a quite distinguished diplomat, largely in African countries. Another became a distinguished librarian. Another became a theologian, and so on and so on.
Wow.
I decided to do something different because in the meantime I'd been to Greece and Italy and fell in love with both countries. I'd learned a little bit of Greek from Teach Yourself Modern Greek. I remember at least one misprint in that book, which I learnt off by heart.
What was that?
Well, it was this spelling of the capital of Cyprus, Lefkosia.
Right.
Which they put an extra vowel into it, an extra syllable, in fact.
Right.
And anyway, I learned to correct that eventually. I thought, why don't I see if I can do a topic in modern Greek? I went along to the lecturer in modern Greek in Cambridge and sort of asked whether this was a good idea, and he said, well, why not? And suggested a subject which turned out to be a terrific subject. I never get tired of it, and so that's how it happened.
So have you been to, obviously, how many times have you been to Greece?
I don't know, I can't count.
Lost
many
count.
times.
Do you have a favourite place or favourite
Well,
island?
the first time I went to Greece was actually in 1964.
Oh, wow.
So I am very old, to be honest. When George Papandreou, the elder, was Prime Minister.
The original.
I mainly go to the parts of Greece where I've got work, where I've got study or research to do since then. Of course, I went to Crete to see the things that are to be seen there, Kostakidis and all the rest of it. Went to other places as well, not to the whole of Greece. But this research topic, which Mr. Papastavro, the lecturer, suggested to me, is connected with Crete. It also gave me the chance to do a lot of research in Italy, in Venice to be precise. Well, I like Crete and I like Venice, so there we are. So yes, I've been back to Greece very often. Usually spend some time in Crete, also in Athens, of course, and probably in other places as well when I can, when there's time or a reason.
There you go.
Fantastic.
How good is that?
Absolutely. Well, look, we're already about half an hour in. We haven't even spoken about the book yet.
Yes.
We're enthralled by your stories. But look, let's talk a little bit about it because, again, the title of the book is,
Who is this song?
Whose is this song?
And a question mark. So, Tom, we've got to work out who's this song by the end of the episode.
By the end of the episode.
We're going to find out.
We won't give too much away because I've actually got to read the book. But
yeah, but look, maybe we should start off.
Well, the title isn't really my title. This is the title of the documentary film, Whose Is This Song, by Adela Peeva. She's a Bulgarian filmmaker, and what she does in this is she has a song, or in reality it's really a tune rather than a song, because a song has to do with lyrics, a tune is more the music. Alfred was going to talk about that because he wrote about that in the book about the tune. So I will just talk about the documentary film that inspired this. She shows this song to different people from different countries, from Turkey, Greece, Serbia, Albania, and she plays the song and says, oh, is this song Turkish, or is this song Greek, or is this song Serbian, and once they hear it, they go, no, that song's not Greek, it's ours, so everyone claims this song. And not only do they claim the song, but they can actually get very upset if you suggest that that song could belong to anybody else.
Wow.
And that's where the nationalism comes in, that people are not willing to share things, right? Because a tune is a tune, it travels around, but once you take it and you make it your own song and you add words to it, it does become yours in a way, right? But so the documentary started off at a table with a whole lot of people having at a taverna, a Turkish taverna in Constantinople, and they're arguing over who this song belongs to, that this woman is singing, this beautiful woman in the taverna, in the tavern. And so that's how it begins. So she travels around basically asking questions, and she travels to Mytilene, right, Lesbos, and she says to the Greeks there, oh, does this sound like it's Turkish or something to you, whatever, and they just laugh, as Greeks always do. They always assume everything belongs to us anyway, so ha ha ha.
Doesn't it?
And and they said, no, it's from Lesbos. In Greece it's considered an Aegean song, Anyway, I won't go more about the song, but the thing that interested me was that as she was travelling around, the anger that people had against the other groups as to how dare they take something that was ours, And as we know, this book has all different chapters, because what I tried to do in the book was get some experts or people who knew more than I did about certain topics to put in the background of the history of the place. Without Alfred's help, I couldn't have done it, because Alfred checked the integrity of the book by checking a lot of the facts, and I can't say that I agree with every single thing that every single person has written in the book, because I allow people free speech. I truly believe in free speech and free thought, but there are chapters on various things. Like there's a chapter there on the Prespa Agreement, for example, by Dr. Helen Vatsikopoulos.
Yes.
And that's a very contentious issue. Whether we like it or not, it's been done. The Skopjeans are known as Northern Macedonia now. That's what it's known as, and we have to respect that. In the other way, though, they have to respect the fact that Alexander the Great is considered to be one of our national icons, a Greek national icon, and not theirs, So there's a lot of those sort of things in the book that are explained really well, I think. And for people who don't know much about the Balkans and the Balkan area, I think it's very helpful because it gives you all that background. Alfred's written a whole section at the back that goes country by country as to how many people there are there, what languages they speak, what the backgrounds are, how everything's come about. So basically the book has come about after the breakup of Yugoslavia, where all these little nations wanted to create their own identity and became very nationalistic, and that's what Della Pieva, I believe, tried to show, that these people, even though they have a shared culture, either have no memory of it, or they've lost that memory of it, or they ignore that, because in their trying to become a nationalistic state, they sort of have to make sure that no one else has what they have. Otherwise, if you have what I have, then I can't be who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's mine, it can't be yours. And the idea of borders. And one thing I really like is because when I started looking for these documentary films, and the reason the book came about was because I was studying documentary film in the Balkans with Professor Vrasidas Karalis, actually, and he suggested to me that I go and look for documentary films because there wasn't a lot written about this subject. And then I found a number of films, including Lodi Desmet's film The Majority Starts Here, which is an amazing documentary. Again, it's like a travel documentary about a whole lot of young people from different areas of previous Yugoslavia who as children experienced the war and the genocides and the ethnic cleansing. That's a really good documentary. But also the other documentary that made a big impression on me was the one by Petra Seliska called Mother Europe. She actually travels around Europe as well with her young daughter, a 6-year-old, And she actually approaches the idea of nationalism and borders. And there's one little quote I have in the book where the mother says to the daughter, "Do birds know about borders?" Because they're looking at these birds flying around, and the little child says, "No." And the mother says, "How come you know?" And the child says, "Because I'm human." So that's it. Like, if you're human, you know, you want to create this border around your place and where you belong, and you need to belong somewhere. And
Wow. Okay. Well, how do we unpack that, Tom? There's a lot in there.
There is, but what I do want to ask, though, because you've mentioned a few names there, and we know, many friends of this show, for example. So Helen Vatsikopoulos is a friend of the show. We've had Vrasilas on the show as well. Billy Cotsis.
Billy Cotsis writes in this book as well.
These are all people who have contributed to the book. How did you get them to contribute?
Okay. Firstly, I thought, if I put this book together and write this book, no one knows who I am. Okay, this is in all reality, that's what it is. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all my friends, right, a lot of friends who are academics and writers and historians, and to give me a chapter. So I said to them, this is the topic. What can you give me that can help this book?
This is an astute editor's decision, by the way.
Yes. Now, the first person, of course, I asked was Alfred, because I know that Alfred, not only does he know about the history and he understands nationalism, but he also understands that whole area. He speaks a number of languages, and I really needed Alfred to be on my side. Without Alfred, this would not have been possible. He helped me with the whole editing of the whole thing. Right. He might have my name on it, but without Alfred, it would not be possible. Okay, I'm telling you that right now. So I know that Alfred wanted to talk about the documentary film, the tune in the film, so that's what he talks about.
Yes.
There are other people in here. There are other academics in here.
There's a whole list
there's George Michalakakis, for example, is a local philosopher that we have and is an artist, and he writes about patriarchy in the songs, in Greek songs basically, and in this song in the film. There's a Professor Marian Tutui from Romania, a university there. He actually contacted me when he read my chapter, because I had written this one chapter, and on academia it actually got to the top 1% of downloads, because so many people were interested in it. And that's what made me think, oh, well, why don't I put this into a book? But it wasn't enough. Like, it wasn't a complete book, you know. So he writes about the Manakia brothers, and you might have heard about them. A couple of the first people in the area who were doing filming in early 1900s. There's Helen Vatsikopoulos, who wrote about the Balkans, the curse of too much history. Vrasilas Karalis also wrote about Greek music and its complexities, that speaks a bit about other sort of influences in Greek music. Nicholas Doumanis, professor now at Chicago Uni.
Another one. Another friend of ours.
Yes, and I've worked with Nicholas on the Greek history archives. So he talks about identity and migration from that area.
Yeah.
There's also Michael Karadzis, who's another academic who wrote about the Balkans, Europe's periphery. He does like a Marxist analysis of that. Yeah. George Sotirios, the writer and travel writer, his book, he wrote a chapter called Fortress Europe. You might know his book called Graffiti Over Marble. If you haven't interviewed George, you should interview George. Costa Verdzaya, of course, who has been to the Balkans many times. Billy, who's written about absorbing Greece. And that's what it is, basically.
Wow. Amazing. Oh, look, most obvious question in the room. So what is this song? What's the Greek version for starters?
The Greek song is Apo Kseno Topo. I don't know if you know the one that goes Apo Kseno Topo kya palargino, Apo Kseno Topo kya palargino.
That deserves a clap.
La 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 la. You know that one. I think Alfred can answer this question now about what is this song. Go on, Alfred.
And just before we get there, so how many ethnicities claim that song as theirs? So we're not talking about the lyrics. The lyrics change. It's just the music, the score.
Yeah. Well, I think every single country in the Balkans would claim this song, and theirs. Turkey, because the northern part of Turkey is still considered part of the Balkans, because that's the western part, where Kostakidis is. So they all claim it. I think Alfred knows a lot more about that than
Alfred. How many countries are we talking about? Half a dozen?
Oh, more than that.
Really?
Yeah, of course, the book's title was Whose Is This Song? And Adela Peeva, in the film, continually asks people about the song, and she doesn't separate the words from the music. Now, the tune is recognizable in all of these countries. And in fact, the tune has spread to Pakistan, even as far as Indonesia.
Wow.
The same tune is used in countless countries, but always, of course, with different words. It's been set to totally different words, which are totally different in tone and function, you know. So that, I mean, in Turkey it may be used to accompany a patriotic or nationalistic march. Elsewhere in the Balkans it's a simple love song, and so on and so on.
And a religious song too.
It's, well, yes, a group of Bosnian Muslims set some religious words to it, Muslim religious words, of course. For many, many decades, people in the Balkans, in each individual country, were just singing this song quite innocently, you know, taking it as part of their own tradition. On the whole, I would say it's part of urban musical traditions. It's not a rural folk song on the whole, not sung as one, though obviously people in the countryside can sing it. But it's part of a urban musical tradition which spread around all the countries of the former Ottoman Empire and even wider. And I mean, there were some singers who in the early 20th century and before could sing in many languages and dialects and did tour all over the Balkan region. I mean, the most famous one in Greece, of course, is Rosa Eskenazi, who is of Sephardic Jewish origin from Constantinople, and she could sing in more than one language, Greek, Turkish, I'm pretty sure in Ladino, in the Judeo-Spanish, which she would perform in some communities where there was a big Spanish-speaking Jewish community. In most of these places, the lyrics are totally different, totally unrelated. The only exception really is the sort of central Balkan countries, which speak variants of the language which we used to call Serbo-Croatian, and which now, for nationalist reasons, has been split up into 4 different languages: Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, and now Montenegrin. When I was learning a tiny bit of Serbo-Croatian, we regarded it as one language. It's just different.
Are they all part of the Slavic dialect? So Bulgarians,
yes,
Serbians, Croatians, yes. Montenegro, Romanian, did they speak that?
No. Starting with Romanian. Romanian is a Romance language. It's derived, in other words, from ancient Latin. It's got a lot of words in common with modern Italian and French and so on. It's also got quite a lot of Slavonic words in it, and it's got a very complex grammar, which does derive ultimately from Latin, but is different from the grammar of the Western European Romance languages. So Romanian is a bit of an outlier, as is Albanian and Greek. The other languages which you mentioned, they're all Slavonic languages. They belong to this big Slavonic language family, which includes Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, Czech and Slovak and so on.
Just a question on that. So where did that Slavic language originate from?
Well, that's a question which historians and linguists have been discussing for ages and ages, and there's no real clear, definite answer. But somewhere on the sort of borders of Europe and Asia, it's not at all clear.
Okay.
Somewhere in the sort of possibly the steppe region of, which is now regions of southern Ukraine and to the east of that. But there are so many theories, we really don't know.
And we're talking what era?
Well, it's part of the Indo-European family, so ultimately it presumably goes back to a common Indo-European language, which again is somewhere between the east of Europe and the west or central part of Asia. But these are issues which are continually being discussed, debated, and so on.
Sure.
So ultimately, those languages and Greek and Albanian and Romanian all belong to the same big family. But the Slavonic languages, you could say, are a subfamily within the Indo-European languages. Languages which we've been talking about belong to the southern group, basically, or southeast group. Bulgarian and the language of North Macedonia are closely related, so much so that the Bulgarians claim that the language of Skopje is simply a dialect of Bulgarian.
Yes.
But of course, languages and national languages, they're not created in heaven, They're created by human beings in specific circumstances. And as national languages were formed very often together with national states. The only difference really between a language and a dialect these are not linguistic, they're not scientific differences, they're political differences.
Yes.
In other words, a national language is a dialect backed by an army. And a state school system, of course.
Yes.
So Bulgarian and North Macedonia are a separate sub-branch. All the others, what's now called Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, and what's the other one? Montenegrin. They were all languages which 30 years ago were called under the umbrella of Serbo-Croatian. You could choose to learn whichever pronunciation and grammar you preferred. If you went to former Yugoslavia, you might have to learn a few double terms, like, for example, the word for train in Serbia is a vlak in Croatia, and so on. There's little sort of doubles which you have to learn. But basically they're all mutually comprehensible.
Yeah.
If you called a train a voz in Croatia, I'm sure the Croatians would understand you, even if they pretend not to at first.
Yeah. Because we do have, I've got friends here that say they can speak 10 languages, but they're all the they're all the Slavic dialects. So if you understood Serbian, you could speak Montenegrin, Croatian, Bulgarian.
Absolutely.
But Albanian's a bit different.
Albanian is totally different.
Totally different.
Completely
it's like
different.
Greek.
It's a branch of the Indo-European family which is an outlier. It's on its own, as is Greek and as is Armenian. And some people try to prove a relationship between some of these, Greek and Armenian, for example, but the relationship is quite distant.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas the languages which you're talking about are basically largely mutually intercomprehensible, which means that not only the actual music, but also the words can be adapted very quickly, taken over from one to the other. Right. So within those countries, you've got some songs with more or less the same words. I mean, there's a famous Serbian song, which is sung in the documentary, heard in the documentary, which is also a famous Bosnian song, Sevdalinka, which is the word which they use for the old Bosnian songs. And there, the Serbian song simply has an introduction, a few extra lines at the beginning, which have a slightly Muslim flavour. But otherwise, when you get onto the lines identical to the Serbian lines, well, as I say, they are identical. So within those countries, words and music could travel very, very quickly, and still do to some extent. I mean, the Bosnians will say that Sevdalinke, this old kind of basically love song, and originally it had an oriental kind of melody, this sort of song, with quarter tones and so on, a bit like some variants of Greek song.
Nowadays, what we were talking about a few weeks ago with Michailakis.
Nowadays it's mostly played with accordion, which removes some of the oriental flavour. A bit of it still remains. So the Bosnians say that this is a specially Bosnian type of song, and there's some truth in that it's really deeply ingrained in Bosnian culture, but it's also spread beyond the borders of Bosnia, and some of these songs are also popular in parts of Serbia and Croatia and so on.
So the Balkan, is that part of Greece? I'm assuming that's part of Greece.
Okay. Recently we presented this book at the Greek Australian Writers Festival that Helen Vatsikopoulos organised for the Greek community of New South Wales. And the first question that Phil Kafkaloudis, who was the facilitator there, asked the audience, and there was like a couple of hundred people in the audience, he said, "Who is Balkan here? Who is from the Balkans?" And only 3 people put up their hand, right? So obviously a lot of Greeks do not think that they belong to the Balkans.
Well, we think Balkans is the Slavic region.
Yeah, they don't think they belong to the Balkans either, though. So if you ask them, they say the same thing.
Who? Bulgarians?
Yes. They
North
all
Macedonians,
think, they don't want to belong to the Balkans.
So
no
where does that
one wants
word
to belong.
come from? Who created the word?
Well, Alfred, you can tell us who created the word.
Must be Greek, right?
No, mustn't. No, it's probably not Greeks. We're not claiming it.
Well, originally the word seems to have been used in Turkish for the range of mountains which sort of goes through southern Bulgaria and just a bit above the northern Greek border. So the range of mountains going west to east. It seems in Turkish to be a more general word for mountain.
So that's an Ottoman sort of...
Yeah. As a name for the peninsula, for the district, for the area, it seems to have come into use in the 1800s.
Right.
So it's quite recent.
It's relatively new. Isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Now, in Greece, of course, the Balkan area is known as the Chersonesos tou Emu, but that is not an ancient term. It was not really considered as a peninsula in ancient times, as far as we can see. So Chersonesos tou Emu may be a sort of translation into Greek of the German term for Balkans, the Balkan Peninsula.
Right.
So what the Balkans is, well, I just say it's basically purely a geographical term.
Right.
It needn't have any political or moral or cultural connotations whatsoever.
It does have a bad connotation,
Well,
though, because of the breakup of Yugoslavia. They call it the Balkanization, they say, of those states.
Well, this is going to be my question. I mean, we've said this before, Nick. I mean, a good idea has many fathers, and a bad one is an orphan. Why does no one want to own up to the Balkans?
One thing they said was that the Balkans has a lot of bad history because they have more history than they can cope with, apparently, some English historians said. But in reality, I really like what Michael Kostakidis says in his chapter, because he actually debunks that whole thing, because Europe has had many more wars than the Balkans have ever had. Europe has caused more wars, and England and France, than any of the Balkan countries have. So I think that his chapter is very relative to this here to explain that, you know. But whether we like it or not, that is the Balkan geographic area, and we are part of it, you know.
Sure. So it describes the southeastern part of Europe, I guess.
That's right.
Well, southeastern, yeah. When I was writing a couple of chapters for Eleni's book, I thought, shall I call it Balkans or shall I talk about southeastern Europe? But I decided on Balkans because I think I'd like to combat that very negative view of the Balkans, for the reasons which Eleni mentions, and also because actually I think that area, my experience of it, is an immensely rich mosaic of cultures, not all of them very ancient, but incredibly rich, and I'm talking both about folk cultures and also about literary cultures, about music, about everything. And that's what I would like to stress about the Balkans. Even in little tiny districts, there are varieties of culture which are highly, highly individual. Think, for example, about the songs of Epirus. You know, the polyphonic songs, sort of choir songs sung by 2 or 3 different voices. It's a type of singing which is typical of Epirus, not of any other part of Greece.
It's a great place.
But also a similar type of singing is used in southern Albania, in the Albanian language, probably in the Greek language too, because of course there's a Greek-speaking population there. There's even been some festivals, which Billy Cotsis mentions in his chapter, where people from both sides of the borders have sort of showcased this type of singing. So that's just one example of a small region which has a very, very specific individual culture. In Greece, of course, there's masses of these. There's the culture of Crete, you know, the music of Western Crete, the Rizitika basically, and different styles in Eastern Crete. There's the old conflict between the lira and the violin, of course. You know, so wherever you go, if you search, you find this enormous richness. Some of it is shared between regions. Some musical instruments, for example, are similar in many parts of the Balkans. Others are quite individual, idiosyncratic, and that's one thing which makes the whole area so fascinating.
So what were the common musical instruments of the Balkans that you just mentioned?
Well, one which I'm thinking of is an instrument basically similar to the bouzouki. The bouzouki is a modern type of old medieval instrument. In Byzantine medieval Greek writings, it's called the tambouras.
Yes.
And that name is used again more recently by players. Now, of course, it's the an equivalent of the Turkish sounds, a long-necked lute, basically.
Yes.
Was that the instrument played by General Makriani?
Yes, Makrianis' instrument is it's now displayed in the historical the historical museum in Athens, and if I remember rightly, it's described there as a bouzouki. But if I remember from General Makrianis' memoirs, he describes it as a tambouras, I think.
Right.
Don't quote me on that, but I think
We spoke at length
it is.
about
I've
this.
looked at that
everybody can
recently,
look that up anyway.
We spoke at length about the instrument a
so-
few episodes ago, and this all lines up.
So in Croatia, for example, the Croatian folk instrument, a very popular one, is a tamburica, which has a similar name and similar shape.
So Croatians have a bouzouki type of instrument.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's usually not so highly decorated as the Greek bouzouki. Don't remember how many strings, whether it has 3 or 4 courses, but anyway, it's a member of the same family.
Right.
And there are other instruments also which are common to many different areas. The gaida, for example, the bagpipe with chanter, that's used in both northern Greece and also in Bulgaria. The lira, the pear-shaped lira, like the Cretan lira.
Yes.
Of course, that's also used in Constantinople, the politiki lira. A similar instrument is used in Bulgaria, the gadolka, which has sympathetic strings. That's a whole lot of extra strings behind the main strings, which create a lovely tingly sort of sound.
Almost like a sitar, I guess.
Yes, same sort of approach, because the sitar also has sympathetic strings. And I've actually heard an instrument of similar shape to the Cretan lira played in the city of Dubrovnik on the Croatian coast, where they call it by a similar name, Lijerice, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
So
all of these instruments, though, I mean, when we're talking about, whose song is it? I mean, in my mind, the song is the framework and the melody to it and whatnot. That's the framework upon which this is built. The instruments is the way it's reinterpreted. So is there much crossover? I think part of what Nick is asking, is there much crossover between the instruments that are used across the reinterpretations, or are they all distinct?
Look, this song was actually sung by Eartha Kitt in America.
Really?
Yes.
Catwoman?
Jazz style. Jazz instruments.
Wow.
Yes, with words in Turkish, using the
Words
Turkish
in
word.
Turkish.
Wow.
Yeah,
I just know her from Batman, because she played Catwoman. Yeah.
Was she the Catwoman in the 70s?
She was probably
Batman?
the third or fourth, but yeah, she was.
I'd say the framework, the foundation on which everything is built is the melody. And the melody can be played on a whose number of instruments. It's not a particularly oriental melody. It doesn't require quarter tones or all kinds of complicated things. So, you can play it on an electric piano or a guitar or absolutely everything. So people use whatever instruments they're habitually using. In parts of the Balkans, it would have been carried around quite a lot, I think, by travelling gypsy musicians, because in parts of the Balkans, professional musicians tend to be Roma, I should say, who were hired for weddings and other festivals and things. So they would have played quite a big role in transporting it around the Balkans.
Spreading it around, wow.
And in fact, in Serbia, you should say about the Serbian priests' reaction to the gypsy-style, Bregovic-style music.
Yes,
because there's a lot of this sort of thing in the book that is of interest,
You've got a lot of people contradicting themselves or contradicting other things. I mean, we've seen the gypsies, the Roma, in the book. I'm used to using that other word. I know I should call them Roma.
Yeah.
So we see them performing, and then the priest performs exactly the same instrument, the same song, on an instrument very similar to a bouzouki, and then goes raving on about how the Roma have taken over Serbian music and blah, blah, blah. The gypsification, he calls it in the English translation.
Okay. So do we know when the song was first recognised or recorded in any way? Do we know who wrote it?
No.
That
That would
the
answer
mystery?
the question, wouldn't it?
Well, not necessarily.
I actually discovered a written score of the music which has not been noticed by most other writers about the song and doesn't appear on the video. It was included in a songbook by the Romanian musician and writer and poet and artist of all trades, Anton Pan, in 1850.
What's his name?
Anton Pan.
His picture's in the book,
Yeah.
and he's mentioned by Alfred in the book.
He's a very important figure in early modern Romanian. There is actually a recording on YouTube of the Anton Pan Ensemble.
Yes.
There's even an ensemble named after him in Bucharest, performing the song in Romanian, Turkish and Greek. When I say that, what they perform is the melody with singers performing quite different lyrics in the three languages.
Sure.
So, but the thing about Anton Pan is that he was more of a collector and publicist than a composer of original work. And he doesn't always tell us where he gets his melodies from, but it's well known that he took his material from all sorts of places. He knew Turkish very well, but it is believed that his mother was Greek. This is not certain, but most people believe his mother was Greek and therefore he would have known Greek. He was actually born in the Bulgarian town of Sliven and grew up partly in Chisinau, or Chisinau as it was called, now part of the Republic of Moldavia. There he learned to sing in a Russian Orthodox church and finished up for most of his life in Bucharest in what is now Romania. So he could have got it from anywhere. The most likely sources are Turkish or Greek, I would say, but we don't really know. And the thing is that music for centuries was, this folk music was mostly handed down orally by ear. It wasn't written down. And as far as we know, as far as I know anyway, Anton Pan's published written version is the first written score of the tune that I've been able to find, and nobody else has found any. But someday somebody will probably find some older version. I hope so.
Yeah.
I have my suspicions where it may come from, but we don't know, and we shouldn't talk about these things if we've not got evidence.
Sure.
But this is just one song like that. There are hundreds, if not thousands, there are hundreds of songs like
I wouldn't
this.
say hundreds, Eleni,
Well,
but
quite
quite a few.
There are songs like Kazantzidis, for example.
Yes.
I've traced 89 of the songs that Kazantzidis sang, that the tunes were actually from India. Directly from India. The tunes were written directly from India. The words were changed to Greek. And there's others like Stratos Ionisiou that sang other Indian songs, and there's a lot of other singers. So I think that it would be up there.
I think the important question there, though, is were the songs that Kazantzidis or Ionisiou sort of reinterpreted, was that done in such a way that was, I don't know, the best way to phrase this?
Some of them were recorded as if they were their songs, if that's what you mean.
Yes. So, because later on with Aggelopoulos, for example, there were very clear Turkish songs.
Where they were from.
Where there was we'll record this Turkish song. There was an understanding that, we got this from somewhere else. Yeah. What we're saying here is these are songs that were probably not under copyright, let's say.
No, probably not.
And they've just been appropriated, I guess.
Possibly, yeah. Some of them were, not all of them, but some of them definitely. And also a lot of the songs that were the early Rebetika, I think, that were first recorded in America were often attributed to the person who did the recording. And in reality, they existed long before that.
Yeah, right.
The appropriation of Indian songs by Kazantzidis and others was only possible because of recording. It was only possible really in the last century or so when there's been recordings available. And so really nowadays anybody can take anything from anywhere, legally or otherwise.
That's right.
In the sort of period that we're talking about, mostly songs, words and music were carried physically from place to place. Obviously there was no recording of them, no recording available, but musicians often travelled. And as well as musicians, there were traders, there were soldiers, there were diplomats.
So news travelled like that? Fairy tales?
Yes.
Yeah. Poetry or folk poetry?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, things did travel around.
And particularly there was no borders that you mentioned earlier.
Not in the Ottoman Empire, that's right.
So you could travel anywhere.
That's right.
As a very good example of a myth, a story which travels, is the story of the Bridge of Arta. You know, the story where people are building a bridge and the sort of supernatural being appears to them and says, you won't be able to build this, it'll keep falling down, whatever you build will fall down. You can only save it in one way, you have to sacrifice a woman, usually the wife of the master builder, in the foundations of this bridge. Yeah. And that in Greece is a very famous folk song. There's hundreds of versions, literally hundreds this time from the Greek world.
Also in Serbia.
But it's all similar songs with a similar type of story are very well known from Serbia, Albania, from Romania, and slightly similar things even from much further afield. So that's another, what's travelled is the basic story, not the music, because the melodies which it's sung to vary hugely from place to place. So in a way it's a very opposite case to that of the Apo Kseno Topo song.
I can't help but think there was a documentary some years ago that was done about musicians who basically take snippets from other songs and there was one artist in particular called Girl Talk that was, I don't know if you've heard of this, but basically taking snippets to create a whole other new song.
Entity.
I just can't help but think that this situation is like a proto version of that, pre-copyright in some respects. I mean, what would have happened in your estimation if there were copyrights in place?
Well, there wouldn't have been copyrights with this sort
Certainly
of music.
not, but
No,
So this sounds like it's nearly
But definitely,
impossible.
once it's been recorded, people
Yes.
do think it belongs to them, and there is copyright there. That's what they believe. Yeah.
So 1850 is probably the furthest you get back for this particular song. So 1850 is when you think it may have originated around that time.
No, not
or even older.
1850 is the first printed version. Of the tune.
So who knows where he got it from.
With Romanian words.
Yeah.
But it's the first known version of the tune. Mm-hmm. It's actually printed in Byzantine notation, not in Western stave, because this is how Anton Pan worked. He was also a famous singer in the Orthodox Church, and responsible for publishing a great deal of Orthodox Church music in Romanian. He was also a printer, but anyway. That's just the first time that we know it existed, because we've got this printed version. But how much older it was, we don't know.
No one knows. Wow.
By the way, that documentary I was talking about was called RIP, a Remix Manifesto. Not that it's exactly the same thing. It's been years since I watched it, but it's like a modern version of this conundrum, let's say. But, very interesting.
Well, copyright existed of a kind. Kinds of copyright have existed for many centuries, but with printed material.
Yes.
But nobody really thought of putting copyright on folk songs. Yeah. So, of course, they have no copyright. But as Eleni said, quite often people will claim authorship of a tune or of a song, I suppose, because they think nobody will challenge it. Yeah. But, it's quite incorrect.
I guess the strongest would end up claiming it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the same thing with fairy tales, Cinderella in Greece had, Snow White, there were 12 dwarfs, not 7. It's different in every country.
Oh, so hang on. There's
another symbolical number.
That's Snow White.
There's a Snow White version in Greece, and there's
with 12 dwarfs. That's right, not 7.
For 12 apostles? Is this the...
Who knows?
12 months of the year.
Who knows? But there are many different versions, but the first person that actually collects these stories or songs or music or whatever it is and gets it in print,
yes,
that becomes the version that we accept, because that's the only version we have access to.
Yeah, okay.
It's the same as, accepting the borders that you were talking about.
Well, the borders keep changing.
Yeah.
That's another thing in the book. The borders are always changing, and people sometimes have problems knowing, what am I? Am I Croatian? Am I Serbian? Am I Bosnian? What am I? There's a lot of issues there, and one of the documentary films specifically talks about that. Mama Europa by Petra Seleska, that I talk about here, follows that. you know, where she actually talks to people that don't know what they are. You know, the guy, he says, I asked my mother, what am I? Am I Croatian or am I Italian or am I whatever? And she says, ask your father. And he says, oh, ask your mother, you know. And then he goes to the army and his name is different. So, you know, he's not accepted into the army for one country. They want him in another country. And, you know, like there's one place in one of the videos where there's a hotel and there's a border going right in the middle of the hotel, which is just ridiculous, you know. These people have suffered a lot in these areas. They've really suffered a lot.
So I have to ask about, I mean, you mentioned earlier about asking the crowd, you know, who's Balkan here? Is there an element of discomfort when people, well, for Greeks, for example, who would read something like this, when it comes to things like, you know, that mentality that we own this? How confronting is it? You know
the musician Dionysis Savvopoulos. He says, "Εδώ είναι the Βαλκάνια, δεν είναι παίξεγέλασε," right? Even Markopoulou has had music where he's used instruments like that and played that. The Greeks know what the whole situation is. The Greeks in Greece know exactly what it is. But sometimes the Greeks who are outside of Greece view things a lot differently, because we like to keep hold of what we consider to be conserving Greek culture, you know. And the Greek culture has you know, keeps changing all the time. But for us, it's the Greek culture that was here for 50 years ago. My parents came, or, you know.
I mean, that is true of the diaspora in particular.
Yeah, we're more nationalistic in a way for things like that. We're more, I don't know, it's a type of good nationalism. It's not a bad nationalism. Look, it's a, I think once Alfred said it, it's a naive style of nationalism.
Is it maybe a case of Greeks feel like we lose a lot? We're always losing our culture. That's all we're really...
Yeah, and we're holding on to things. We're holding on to the church or the religion, but the language is very important.
Yeah, I'll give you a really good example. So maybe I'll ask you a question. What's the symbol of Islam? The star and the crescent moon. So I read a lot about that, and it's actually a Byzantine symbol. And it was a Greek Byzantine symbol. It was part of Constantinople. Even before Constantinople, it was called Byzantium. And that crescent moon and the star was actually a Greek symbol. But somehow we've lost that symbol, and now it's an Islamic.
And the croissant is also based on...
I would ask about that. Where did the Greeks get it from, or where did the Byzantines find it?
I don't know. I wasn't around.
Whoa.
It's what I read. We
have to be careful also of not trying to...
I'm only saying this is what I've read, and it's I don't know if it's biased or not. I'm trying to work out what the source was.
Who told us about... I think it was Panayoti who was talking about the crescent and the croissant.
Oh, that makes sense now.
That's
My
Austrian.
good old friend Panayiotis.
Said it's actually... he said it's Austrian.
Yeah.
You said the Austrians created it.
Yeah, the Austrians created the croissant too.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that.
But that's an example of a symbol that was, you know, ancient Greek, or again, according to what I've read.
I don't know. Look, one thing about the Greeks is that we, over the centuries, over thousands of years, have gobbled up a lot of other languages, a lot of other cultures along the way, smaller cultures that may not exist anymore. So we've got to understand that sometimes we take something and we make it ours. 1,000 years from now, people are going to say, "Oh, that's Greek." You know?
Again, we had a similar discussion when it came to the origins of moussaka with Peter Kanistas and David Tsarekis about, you know, what are the origins of this dish, and the discussion ended up on National Geographic. Yeah. So the podcast was used as a source, but you know, and that, you know, it was quite definitive in the sense that its origins were as a Turkish dish, which we have then reinterpreted.
Very well. We've interpreted it
absolutely.
Very well. We perfected it.
Absolutely. But I think that's the whole point. You know, the term reinterpretation for mine keeps coming up. It has an origin somewhere. I mean, is that part of what the message is? Is it the fact that many people claim ownership to this? It has been reinterpreted. It has roots everywhere. Let's just own this together. Sort of
look,
thing.
We have to own things, and we have to own things that we've got from the Ottomans as well. You know, like I consider to be from an Ottoman Greek family. Yep. Okay, it's no different than people on the Ionian Islands saying that they're from, you know, Venetian Greek influenced. You know, and a lot of their foods, a lot of their music, a lot of their, you know, their stories are from there. Yes. You know, there's nothing bad in that. I don't see anything bad. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
I think food is a wonderful paradigm of how cultures develop, how humans develop their cultures. because obviously, presumably, people have always been eating. There's always been food.
Yeah.
And each generation may discover some new foods or some new recipes or whatever, but there's a continuity. I once edited a text by a Cretan refugee written in the 17th century. He was a refugee in Italy after the Ottomans conquered Crete. And he really loved Cretan food and wine, and so he's got page after page on the food and wine. It really makes you hungry and thirsty to read this book. I've had fun comparing his description of food and wine with what's now called the Mediterranean or the Cretan diet.
Okay.
And 300 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was distinctly similar. Why was it similar to today's? Well, basically because a lot of the foods were the same. And you can trace them back to Byzantium and trace them back to the beginning of time. You can trace them back, if you like, to ancient Mesopotamia, where, some of the first city civilizations developed. Anyway, but food continually develops. For example, Papadopoulos, that's his name, his memoirs don't say anything about potatoes or tomatoes.
They
Why?
didn't exist then.
Yeah. Because there weren't any. They'd not brought them in. So...
And rice too.
Well, he had a bit of rice, so it was quite expensive, and he only mentions rice basically as a fasting food, a Lenten food, something like risogalo. Potatoes, in particular, were very recent. They were introduced into Greece in the 1820s and 30s, and yet they've been wonderfully integrated into Greek cuisine. And the same with tomato. You can't imagine Greek cuisine without potatoes.
Tomato salad, village salad.
Yeah,
100%.
So it's just one example that you can't really talk about who a given dish belongs to, because every dish is developed on something earlier.
Yeah,
And
even the modern moussaka, I have only very recently learned that the modern version of moussaka was basically invented by the chef Cele Mendes.
That's right.
I didn't know anything about this. Who
Wonderful
really
chef.
was inspired by
the Greek chef.
by Western Museum.
I have his original.
Amazing.
He brilliantly combined a traditional Eastern dish
Yes.
with something of Western cuisine. So I think food is a wonderful paradigm of culture. That's how culture works.
Yeah.
So can we apply the exact same theory to what we're talking about here, I guess is the question. Do we look at this and be like, guys, we're all in this together. We can all of this can be true at the same time.
Well, in this particular song, you can actually, in this tune, you can actually dissect it even more.
Sure.
In that it's not really a Greek tune to me.
Right, okay.
It's not a Greek tune.
Well, it is a Greek tune because
well,
it's used by Greeks.
Tune now. It's used by Greeks.
It's
that's
not
right.
an exclusively Greek tune.
That's right.
In the same way, the man in Skopje in the film says this is not a Macedonian tune. Now, what he really means is that it's not an exclusively Macedonian tune.
Right.
There's no doubt there's some tunes which are only heard in that region,
That's
whereas
true.
this isn't.
But you're right, to your point, it's how do you find who the original owner
At
is?
some point...
It doesn't matter, does it matter?
No, it doesn't.
At
It
some
shouldn't
point in
matter.
the past, somebody cooked up this tune.
Yeah.
I think that we don't know who, we don't know when, we don't know where, but they didn't create it out of nothing. First of all, it's based on a specific scale system. It's got a specific system of lines and phrases. In other words, that person was working within patterns, and they were traditional, inherited patterns. Patterns which can help people to produce hundreds of different tunes. So the tune itself is individual, but it's also part of a tradition going back, we just don't know how far, probably to the beginning of music.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sort of brings up for me, there's a video online that came, it must be at least 10 years old now. Maybe you guys have seen it on YouTube. It's somewhere in Istanbul. Someone's just filming off their phone, and there's this a guy playing, it's not even a saz, I've never seen this instrument before, but they're sitting in a restaurant, basically, in Istanbul. The guy's playing this instrument, and there's a Turkish man sitting there singing this song, and a guy comes out of the corner who's Greek, and he looks very similar to the guy sitting down. He doesn't know him. He's singing this song, and the guy taps the the guy playing the instrument and says, "Do you mind if I jump in?" He goes, "Go." And he starts singing the exact same song in Greek. It's not the song we're talking about here, though. And by the end of the song, they're both trading phrases. They're singing different stanzas.
That's beautiful.
And at the end of the song, they both hug, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most unifying things that I've seen when it comes to
bringing people together.
Absolutely, and
well, there are other songs that Alfred has mentioned in his chapter that are like that.
Yeah.
That are songs that are sung both in Turkish and Greek.
Yeah.
The Turkish singer Dilek Koç has produced, I think, 2, possibly more CDs of what she calls the shared music of Greeks and Turks in Asia Minor. On one of those CDs, Eleftherias, the Greek singer, joins with her.
Yeah.
I think Dilek Koç has now made her career in Greece, so I'm not quite sure whether she's still there. But anyway, so there's plenty of examples of that.
But that song, Siko Horeb Siko Klimu, that Shinanai Yavrum Shinanai, that's one.
How does it
There's
go?
a lot more.
I do that one actually with George.
Oh, wow. So they're not Greek either.
That one. My grandmother used to sing that.
I'm impressed with Eleni's singing. This is very good, Eleni. Are you a singer by any chance?
No. I used to sing years ago, but just songs, my
You're
own
too
songs.
modest.
Yes.
So you've had 2 episodes in a row where we've got the guest to sing. Tom?
You're doing well. Actually, no, you didn't get George to sing, did you? Did he sing anything?
Oh, I sang Diddle Da. That didn't really sing.
Not the right version, though.
No, he didn't. By the way, the Crescent Moon and Star, it was in Britannica. I read it in Britannica.com. So
People still use that?
I do.
I'm happy to see you using a credible source, Nick.
Yeah, there's a couple out there. That was just the first one. But anyway, look, it is what it is. But you're right. How far back do you want to go? Who created it? No one knows. So you talked about nationalism as well. So when was the rise of nationalism? Because I think we might have discussed this earlier. Was it around that era? Who wants to
Go on,
take that?
Alfred.
You both pointing to each other.
This is a very new thing, nationalism. It's not a very old thing.
Yeah, and I was only surprised because I thought it was always been around, but it's only a new
hasn't
thing.
been around.
It becomes a sort of overwhelming ideology. One state for one nation for each state. Really around and soon after 1800. So the 19th century is a great period of nationalism, but of course it's still very, very strong in the Balkan region.
At the top of this, you mentioned how, the diversity of the chapters, and, it seems as though it's been covered from every angle.
I tried to cover as much as I could, because this is a very good book for someone who doesn't know the area, doesn't know a lot about it, and would like to find out about it. It's got everything there.
And the good thing is it's
a good
around that
start.
period, late 1800s, early 1900s. So, mate, it's a fascinating read. I've started to read it. Like I said, we can only talk so much about it on a podcast.
But it is a book for someone who's
read it.
studying documentary film, for someone who's studying music, for someone interested in history or politics. It sort of covers all those areas for beginners in those areas.
Yeah. Well, look, all of those topics we love. There's so many great people in this book, including yourselves, obviously, who have contributed to it. As we said previously, Vrasidas Karalis, Billy Cotsis, great
Nick
friends of the
Doumanis,
show, Nick Doumanis,
Helen
Vatsikopoulos.
Yeah.
I mean, the list genuinely does
Alfred.
go on. Alfred, obviously. I mean, how proud are you of the final product?
I'm very proud of it, because there's nothing like this that's been produced here in Australia from one of our sort of, cohort from here like this before. It's a first of its type.
Wow.
So I'm very proud of that. And as I say, it's a joint venture with Alfred here. Couldn't have done it without him.
Yes.
And I thank him very much for believing in it. And all the people who've added here, believing in me.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you have every right to be proud of it, and you were the person who conceived of the idea, after all. So the idea is yours. The copyright, if you like, is yours.
We have
Since
you to
we've been
thank
talking
for it.
about copyright.
So if I become a millionaire, it's there. They do that.
Yeah, definitely. And not just a writer, a good singer, as we've just found out in this
Absolutely.
episode. Yeah,
And
that's
I
right.
wanted to add that this version, which you see here, was printed by a local printer, and I think they've done a great job. They've done a great job in particular with the illustrations. You know, I've seen books, I've got at home some books written by academics and published by commercial but highly respected publishers, which simply don't get this quality of illustrations. I don't know why. I don't know why it's so difficult to get a good illustration, but quite a lot of books simply don't manage it.
Yeah.
And
well, it is printed beautifully. It has to be.
This is partly the good work of Marina Eleftherias, who did the sort of artwork for the book.
The formatting. The formatting.
I mean, we provided the pictures and she sort of...
And the cover is based on the documentary film, so the cover is directly taken from there.
Fantastic. Well, where can people get the book?
Okay, so that's it. Very soon it's going to be available on Kindle as a digital version, and it's going up on Ingram Spark at the moment, so it'll be available worldwide at different bookshops, but it's going to take a while for that to happen. If people want to get it now, they can only get it through the Bilingual Bookshop at 180 Unwins Bridge Road, St. Peters. And it's only open on Saturdays, 10 to 3. So unfortunately, they don't have it on their website because it's not working yet. I used to be the owner of the Bilingual Bookshop, but no longer so. Or they can email
the iconic Bilingual Bookshop.
The iconic Bilingual Bookshop. It's been around for ages, supporting Greek Australian authors. But in the actual book, I've got some Hellenic Theorem at gmail.com, because Hellenic Theorem is the publishing company that publishes this book, and other books that I have published, bilingual books, and there's a couple of books by other authors that are also being published by my publishing little company now, Hellenic Theorem. So if they look up Hellenic Theorem Publishing, whatever, they could probably get it from there. I'm going to set up a website, haven't done it yet.
Well, it's only one last question, Tom, before we wrap it up. Whose is this song?
Well, I think the short answer to that is you need to get the book and read about it and come to your own conclusion.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's
ours. It's ours. It belongs to us.
It's a song to be enjoyed by many. Exactly.
The music belongs to everybody.
Perfect.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well,
Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. Honestly, it's one of these things that we wouldn't have conceived of a podcast like this. So thank you for putting the book together and bringing a story like this to light. Otherwise, we just wouldn't know about it.
Thank you for having us, really.
Yes,
it's been a great opportunity.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
Alfred, thank you so much for being here, both of you. Nick.
Thank you, Eleni.
As always, mate, I leave this room even more enlightened than when I came in. It's not the Tipuro talking.
Yeah, well, I like to think we've learned something today. No, we definitely have. No, it's fantastic.
Well, I can't wait to read it. As I said from the top, I haven't had the chance to read it yet. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I'm sure there's going to be even more questions because whenever I read a book, there's usually a pencil right next to me, and I'm taking notes and doing all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, Eleni, you can expect a very long email in the coming weeks.
So what's down it, mate? It's got everything we like: music, history, geography. It's all there. Documentary.
I know,
and it's
Greek stuff that we love,
and it's Greek, all about Greek stuff.
That's right.
So we love it.
Or is it?
Or is it? Another question. Find out.
Tune in. Same bat time, same bat channel to find out. No.
Catwoman. What was her name again?
Eartha Kitt was the Catwoman we were talking about.
Okay. I have to look her up. Okay.
Yeah. uzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media at uzotalk and at uzo_talk.
And YouTube.
And on YouTube now as well.
Don't forget to follow us.
Yeah, I didn't have anything prepared for that one. Thanks for adding that in.
We want to get to 1,000, guys, so get on there.
Get on YouTube.
Start following us. Thank you.
Nick Doumanis, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.